How's it going, YouTube? We are back after another weekend of tournaments, and I wanted to go over some of the meta stats, but I wanted to do it a little bit differently. So I wanted to break it down by the tournaments. I have Ursaday's tournament from February 8th, which had 1,891 participants. We have the BEC Executive Series from Sunday, February 9th, which had 617 players. Then we have the Frog EX Weekly Tournament from Thursday, February 6th with 760 players. So I'm going to break down some stats and the decks from those, and then I'm going to show you guys the winning decks from each of those tournaments, and then I will show you guys just some decks that I thought were super interesting. So let's start with the first one, the Frog EX Weekly from February 6th. So there were no decks that were played by 10 or more people that had more than a 59% win rate. This is something you'll see in the other two tournaments as well. There are basically no decks that are just running away with everything. No decks are just flying through these tournaments, like going undefeated, just destroying the competition. So if there were less than 10 people playing a certain deck, then I didn't count those because I want a good sizable portion. And so I just thought that was interesting. I know a lot of people post like, oh, this deck's broken, like Darkrai Magnezone. Everyone was like, oh, it's the new meta, it can't be beat. And literally a week later now we're sitting here and there's, we know what beats it, and we'll get into that in this video. In this tournament, the most played were Darkrai Magnezone had 75 people playing it. Gyarados Greninja had 65 people. Charizard Moltres, which is making a big comeback. You'll see that in the other tournaments as well. Charizard Moltres had 56 people playing it. Magnezone Hitmonlee had 56 as well. And then Exeggutor Celebi with 52. There were a few others. Nothing super out there. Palkia Vaporeon, 35 people playing it. And Rampardos Lucario had double-digit people playing it with 14, which was interesting. Out of those, the top 32, or the top cut in this tournament was top 32. So Exeggutor Celebi had 8 decks in the top cut. Darkrai Greninja had 4. Magnezone Hitmonlee had 3, and Darkrai Magnezone had 3, and Gyarados Greninja had 3 as well. So Darkrai Magnezone having the most decks played in this tournament to having the third most decks in the top cut. We'll see more of the Exeggutor Celebi stuff in the other two tournaments. Exeggutor basically went on a rampage as soon as Darkrai came into the game. Exeggutor was like, oh, I have a card that's weak against me. Bet, watch this. So in the BEC Executive Series with 617 players, again, no decks played by 10 or more people in this tournament had more than a 55% win rate. So basically just a coin flip no matter what deck that you're playing. Obviously, if you're a good player with a good deck, you can win some more games, but overall, just having a good deck does not automatically mean that you win more games. The most played decks in this one was actually Moltres Charizard, had 75 people. I found that very, very interesting. Charizard is one of those Pokemon to me so far that has been carried just by the fact that it is a popular Pokemon. Like, it is super powerful, but it's never been something in Pocket that's been like at the very, very top of the meta, but people love this deck. So 75 people played it in this tournament. Darkrai Magnezone had 54, so big jump there. Moltres Charizard had huge numbers in this tournament. Exeggutor Celebi had 53. Exeggutor Mew had 51. Darkrai Greninja had 50. Gyarados Greninja had 39. And Magnezone Hitmonlee had 30. There were a bunch of others that had double digits. There was Yanmega Dialga had 13. A couple of interesting decks in here. And then in this tournament, the top cut was top 64. Exeggutor Celebi had 15 of the top 64 decks. And Exeggutor Mew had 11. So in this tournament, Exeggutor decks made top cut 26 out of 64 spots. That's pretty insane. Exeggutor is easily one of the best cards in this game. That's crazy. Darkrai Greninja had 10. Charizard Moltres had 8 in the top cut. Darkrai Magnezone only had 7, and Magnezone Hitmonlee had 6. And then, of course, Ursaday's tournament had 1,891 players. It is by far the biggest tournament that we have on a weekly basis. No decks were played by no decks played by 10 or more people had greater than a 56% win rate. So like I said, just across the board in these big tournaments, just going in with a deck that everybody says is the best does not mean you're going to win 75-80% of your games. You still have to, draw well, play well, and then you might have a chance. But I found that really, really interesting. There's no decks that just have a crazy, 75% win rate within these tournaments. Over the whole weekend, I'm not sure, but within these particular tournaments, there were no decks that were just by far and away dominating the competition. The most played decks, of course, Darkrai Magnezone 223, Charizard Moltres 177, Exeggutor Celebi 140, Gyarados Greninja 129, Magnezone Hitmonlee 115, Darkrai Greninja 105, and Exeggutor Mew 101. And in the top 64 of this tournament was Exeggutor Celebi had 16 and Exeggutor Mew had 6. So Exeggutor Mew not doing quite as well in this tournament, but that's still 22 of your top 64 spots containing or having a deck that contains Exeggutor EX in it, which is, it makes sense. It's a straight counter to Darkrai. You can get it out pretty consistently. It's not super hard to get Exeggutor EX out. And also being able to heal with Erica and, negate some of the damage that the Darkrai does just by attaching energy is absolutely massive. So no surprise there. Darkrai Magnezone had 8 people playing it. In the top cut, Gyarados Greninja had 7. Darkrai Greninja had 5. And Moltres Charizard also had 5. So out of all of them, it was mainly an Exeggutor weekend and a Darkrai weekend. But let's talk about the 3 tournament winners. And then we'll talk about some decks that just placed relatively well that I just wanted to talk about because I found super interesting. This was the deck run by Gileon in the Froggy X weekly tournament. Very simple deck. 2 Execute, 2 Exeggutor EX, 1 Celebi EX, 2 Professor's Research, of course, 2 Pokeballs, 2 Ericas to heal, 2 Sabrinas, and 1 Cyrus. I love that they have enough room for 2 Sabrinas and 1 Cyrus. It makes this deck so fun. 2 Potions, 1 Pokemon Communication, 1 Rocky Helmet, and 1 Giant Cape. I absolutely love this. It was one of the first things that I thought of when the new set released was using Exeggutor EX for the Pokemon tools because it has such big sustain and you can just keep it out there. Having the 1 Giant Cape for really either Exeggutor EX or Celebi, but especially Celebi having 130 HP and all the Pokemon that do 130 and especially 140 damage, being able to survive that with a Giant Cape. The Rocky Helmet, of course, if you put it on Exeggutor just for extra damage. One of the biggest downfalls of Exeggutor EX is simply just not being able to do enough damage. Even when you are flipping heads, you're only doing 80. Once your opponent gets all ramped up and ready to go, it can be really hard to take them down. So being able to sustain with Erica, being able to pull in a Pokemon that you've damaged previously with Cyrus, using Rocky Helmet for extra damage when they hit your Exeggutor, obviously the potions. This is a really fun deck. It's a deck that is meant to just be you're not worried about what your opponent does. It's very much like, this is what my deck's built around. I'm gonna go out there, swing at you with Exeggutor, build up my Celebi on the bench if I get it, and then if I can't finish off one of your Pokemon early, I will pull it in with Cyrus. Very fun deck. Congrats to Gileon for winning. Let's move on to the Executive Series tournament winner. This is the deck list for the tournament winner for the VEC Executive Series. Very similar to the deck list we just saw, but one little difference that I actually quite like. I found this quite interesting. So, of course, the 2 of the Exeggutor line, 1 Celebi, 1 Shaman, though. If you guys don't know, Shaman heals 10 damage from each of your Pokemon every turn. So not only is it just giving a little bit of extra sustain for your Exeggutor EX, it is also playing against Cyrus, healing your Pokemon back up to full health so that they can't be Cyrus back in. 2 Ericas, 2 Professor's Research. Of course, no Sabrinas in this deck because of the extra cards. 1 Cyrus, 1 Leaf, to retreat, be able to retreat for free. 2 Pokeballs, 2 Potions, 1 communication, 2 Rocky Helmet, 1 Giant Cape. So I'm not going to go into the tools and stuff. Very similar as the last deck. The Leaf, of course, to be able to move your Pokemon around, especially the Exeggutor EX that can be a little bit heavier. And the Shaman to just extra heal alongside your Erica and your Potion. I wish I could watch some of these games. I could probably find them on a live stream, because I'd love to see some of the games where this person started with Shaman in their active spot. Those games might be a little interesting, because you might have to use the Leaf to get it out, or just attach an energy and retreat. It's very interesting. I'd love to see what happens when you start with Shaman in the active spot, but I love this deck list. It seems very, very fun to use. But let's move on to the Ursaday Pocket Tournament winner. And to complete our trio of tournament winners, this was the deck list run by Jauzard. Sorry if I am pronouncing that wrong. At the Ursaday tournament, it is again just another Exeggutor EX deck. However, instead of running Celebi, they run Yanmega. Very, very simple, very basic, very straightforward, very lovely. 2 Exeggutor EX lines, 2 Yanmega EX lines, 2 Ericas, 2 Professor's Research, 1 copy of Cyrus, 1 Leaf, 1 Sabrina, 2 Pokeballs, 1 Communication, and 2 Rocky Helmets. Very easy. You put the Exeggutor EX up, you start swinging, and you build up your Yanmega in the back. I think this was pretty straightforward. I think this was, like, along with Dialga maybe being able to power up Yanmega, I think this was one of the other, like, very, like, oh, this is a deck that Yanmega should be in when this set released, is Exeggutor EX. I think these two Pokemon go together very well. I'd love to find a spot in this deck for maybe a Giant Cape for Yanmega, something like that, but clearly Jauzard didn't need that. He won the tournament on his own with this deck list. Very cool deck list. Not quite as cool as the Shaman one that won the Executive Series tournament, but still, the grass tournament, or the grass decks dominating the tournaments this weekend because of Darkrai, of course. So it'll be interesting to see if the Darkrai Magnezone gets any sort of updates to that deck list to make it better, if anything else can counter Darkrai Magnezone, or what we're going to see next weekend to counter these Exeggutor Yanmega decks. But so far, I'm loving the meta and how it's evolving with Space Time Smackdown. But let's jump into some some decks that were in these tournaments that didn't win, but I had to talk about them because I found them very, very interesting. The first deck I want to talk about is the 12th place deck at the Frog EX tournament run by JV Campos. I had a feeling we were going to see Rampardos decks. 130 damage for 1 energy is insane. If you pair it with something else that can attack, like Lucario, even if you don't get to Rampardos, you can attack with Lucario, get through them that way, and build up other things while you're just waiting to get that online, since it only requires the 1 energy. I'm definitely looking into some Rampardos decks because I just find them so interesting. It is 130 damage for 1 energy is insane, but 2 Riolu, 2 Lucario, 2 Cranidos, 2 Rampardos, 2 Skull Fossils, of course, 1 copy of Marshadow as a backswing finisher, also love that, 2 Professor's Research, 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, 1 Giovanni, 2 Pokeballs, 1 Communication, and 1 X-Speed. Yeah, it's a Rampardos deck list. The Giovanni in there to get to that magical 140 hit point break point. The 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, I am really curious if we're going to see decks keep the 1-1, or if we're going to see more decks run like a 2-0 split, maybe 2 Cyrus. This is very interesting. This seems like a deck you'd maybe want to have 2 Cyrus in, but again, who am I to judge? They won some tournaments, or they didn't win. They got 12, but very, very good finish in a tournament that had a lot of participants. But yeah, I think we will see more and more Rampardos as the set goes on, just because of the low energy requirement and the fact that it's a fossil, meaning if you don't want to start with it, you want to start with your other Pokemon, and you're guaranteed to do that, you can do that. So you can play around with Rampardos in a couple of ways. So very interested in seeing how Rampardos goes into the meta going forward. But yeah, nice 12th place finish by JV Campos. So congrats on that. The next deck is the 8th place finisher in the BEC Executive Series run by Desmond SYM. It is a Lickalily EX deck list. I'm going to have to mess around with Lickalily a little bit. I haven't messed around with it too much, but the 100 base damage and flipping coins continuously for an extra 40 damage seems pretty fun. So 2 Dialga EX, 1 Lickitung, 2 Lickalily EX, 1 Mew EX, 2 Professor's Research, 2 copies of Leaf, 1 Cyrus, 1 Mars, 1 Sabrina, 2 Potions, only 1 Pokeball, very interesting there, 1 Communication, 2 Giant Cape, and 1 Rocky Helmet. So I found this very interesting for a couple of reasons. We've got the 4 basic Pokemon, only 1 Pokeball, so not going with the standard 2 Pokeball, 2 Professor's Research. Found that very, very interesting. I assume the 1 copy of Lickitung would make it so you're more likely to start with Dialga every game and be able to ramp as fast as possible. Which they do have the 2 copies of Leaf to get Dialga out, to get the Lickalily out if they need. I would, if it were me, maybe take the Mars out. It's just the cards right now that control the other player's hand, you can't really tell if it's winning you the game or not because of their hand size, and you don't get to see what's in their hand unless you play certain cards, right? There's going to be certain cards that I think pair well with Mars and Red Card. I just don't think they're here yet. But this deck is probably the weirdest one I'll show y'all today. Yeah, I mean, the 1 Pokeball, just not having that extra draw card is weird, but I guess the goal here is maybe Pokemon communication. So if you Pokeball into maybe another Dialga and you already have one, you just Pokemon communication, hope for the Lickitung. It's a very interesting deck. I'd love to run it. They did very well in the tournament. I don't know if this would do well consistently. I would love to see this in the top of another big tournament this week. So I will be keeping an eye out for Lickalily EX, because if Lickalily EX becomes even somewhat like meta relevant, I will be stoked for that card, because that was like my bottom of the barrel card when this set dropped, like that and Gallade. And I think so far Lickalily and Gallade EX have both proven me wrong, or at least just proven to me that they are better than I thought that they were. But yeah, the Lickalily EX is a fun deck that they finished 8th with in a very big tournament, so congrats to them. This deck list is the 36th place in the Executive Series run by Firestorm010, and I like this deck list because I saw a lot of the Palkia Vaporeon, right? So you can move energy around, use your Dimensional Storm, stuff like that. But I like this deck list because I think that the Starmie EX card is really, really good. Obviously, 0 retreat cost, only 2 energy. You can use a Misty on a Starmie on turn 1, have it ready to go turn 2. Or on a Staryu turn 1, evolve it into Starmie, you're banging. You can put your Palkia out, do some chip damage, and then bring in Starmie EX to hit for 90. The Manaphy there, of course, for ramping to get your Dimensional Storm online as quickly as possible. Professor's Research, 2 Professor's Research, 2 Misty, 2 Leaf, the 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus split again, 1 Giovanni, which I do like because Starmie only hits for 90, the 2 Pokeball, and 1 Giant Cape. I find this deck very interesting. My one personal downside to this deck that I know would happen to me because I'm like the most unlucky player in this game is, like, you know, they'd knock out the Manaphy and then just knock out, you know, Starmie immediately, and there's their 3 points. I think this deck is, outside of Palkia, it's a little flimsy, and with Cyrus being able to pull Mons in for chip damage, but they did really well at the tournament. I do think Starmie is a really, really good card. I just don't think there's other water cards that are quite the the perfect partner for Starmie, and I feel like that, along with up until recently seeing a lot of the electric decks in tournament play and in online play, Starmie EX got a lot less play. But I'm interested to see if anybody does anything with Starmie Vaporeon. I know there was some play with that when it first dropped, but yeah, this deck was super interesting. I'd love to see maybe like a copy of Dawn in here, because with the 0 retreat cost, you can get Palkia online like a turn early. You power it up behind Starmie, retreat the Starmie for free, and then Dawn into the Palkia. But I don't know. They've got the 2 Leafs to save energy from the Palkia and the Manaphy, which is nice. Overall, a very, very nice deck list. I would be intrigued to see what this does going forward. The next deck is the 38th place finisher in the Frog EX deck tournament run by Small Nose. And this is a deck list, or should I say a certain Pokemon that has come onto the scene since the new set dropped, and that is Skarmory. They've got their 4 Pokemon tools so that Skarmory does 50 damage as soon as possible, as early as possible. They have the Wormadam to be their like big finisher attacker with possibly flipping some heads, and then they've got Heatran, who can come in and do some guaranteed 110 damage behind their Wormadam. Very, very interesting deck list. 2 Professor's Research, 2 Giovanni, 2 Cyrus, 1 Dawn, 2 Pokeball, 2 Giant Capes, and 2 Rocky Helmets. So they went with the 2 Cyrus, but with their 2 they have a Dawn, but what I'm curious about is they don't have any X speeds or Leafs to save energy, so I'm not sure. Maybe just if you retreat, you had extra energy somewhere, couldn't draw a basic. But overall, maybe Dawn doesn't fit in here. I'd maybe fit in like an X speed somewhere for your Skarmories and your Wormadams, but the Giant Capes and the Rocky Helmets, of course, they obviously come into play. You can put them on your Wormadam or your Heatran when needed, but they are there so you get one as soon as possible to put on your Skarmory to then start doing 50 damage. Skarmory it takes an extra card. It's not just a Farfetch'd, but it is basically a Farfetch'd with more HP and does 10 more damage if you have a tool on it. So if you're running Skarmory in any of your decks, you need as many Pokemon tools as possible. But 38th place with Wormadam, it's really come onto the scene. I think they put in some good metal support in this set. So interesting to see that Melmetal isn't our good metal card. It's Wormadam. But yeah, interesting deck. Wormadam and Skarmory, 38th place. Our penultimate deck list was the 51st place finisher in the Ursidae tournament by Vector. This is such a funny deck list. The 2 Skarmory, of course, with 2 Giant Cape, 2 Rocky Helmet, and then the 2 Armor Fossil, 2 Bastiodon, and 2 Shieldon. And that's it. That's all they have for Pokemon. They have the 2 Professor Research, 2 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, 2 Pokemon Communication, which I find super interesting in a deck with only 6 Pokemon cards. I find the 2 Pokemon Communication very interesting. 1 Pokeball, and then, like I said, the 2 Giant Capes and 2 Rocky Helmets. I mean, what can I say? This is just meant to be do some chip damage with Skarmory, and then put Bastiodon out and hope that you flip some heads when your opponents have their big attacks. That's what Bastiodon is. If you can just flip some heads when your opponents get off their big attacks, you can really, really live some big attack. I mean, you could even live, a Charizard Crimson Storm if you flip heads. So it's quite honestly, Bastiodon is insane if you are good at flipping coins. But yeah, so this deck did very well. There's not much to say about it. No need for things like X speeds and stuff. Your Skarmory's out first every game, doing hopefully 50 damage turn 1 or turn 2 as soon as you can put energy on. And then you're just building up your Bastiodon in the back and trying to win the game that way. But I wouldn't be surprised if you get some wins just from having Skarmory in the active and knocking out, say, like, an Execute with 50 HP. So very, very interesting deck list. And Bastiodon is just one of the cards that I haven't been lucky enough to pull two of to build a deck, but I do want to build a Bastiodon deck. I think it'd be really fun. But let's get into our final deck of the video. And lastly is my favorite deck on this list. So this was the 67th place, just missed the top cut in the Ursa tournament run by Gurimasu. Sorry again if I am saying that incorrectly. However, just like the first set, Genetic Apex, how I just loved Melmetal and wanted to find good cards for Melmetal, Garchomp has become that for me in this set, and I absolutely love the idea of this deck. Hitmonlee has kind of been the card that I've been like, that we probably need that in the deck. You know, there's some Marshadows you could go with. You could even go with something like an Aerodactyl that is a fossil, so that you're guaranteed to start with your Garchomp, stuff like that. But I love this. The Spiritomb, to be able to draw them in with Cyrus to finish off their finishers before they have them is nice. 2 Professor's Research, 1 Cynthia, 1 Mars, 1 Cyrus, 2 Pokemon Communication, 2 Pokeball, 2 X-Speed, and 1 Giant Cape. And earlier in this video, I was talking about Mars and how I didn't think it was that good. And I don't think it's like this amazing card, but it is an interesting concept in a Garchomp deck, because a lot of the time you do kind of fall behind first, right? You're not doing a lot of damage at first. You're waiting for your Garchomp to get online. And then even sometimes once you get Garchomp online, you're either waiting for energy, or you're doing your Reckless Shearing every turn trying to get that Cynthia. I think with a deck like this, I think the Giant Capes are necessary. It's just so tough. Everything's a trade-off, but I think the Spiritomb being able to... I think if it were me, if I were to run this deck, the one small tweak I would make right off the bat is taking out that copy of Mars for maybe a second copy of Cyrus or a second copy of Cynthia. And I don't think that having 2 copies of Cynthia is necessary, in that you need both of them to win the game, but it's just a consistency thing. And I do think that most of the time you do need at least a copy of Cynthia to win a game. And I think not having that copy of Cynthia can be rough, but again, you do have Spiritomb and Hitmonlee coming in to do damage. I will say, in the few decks, or the few times that I've tried Hitmonlee, the biggest issue, which is the biggest issue for any multicolored deck, is sometimes you just draw water energy and you can never attack with Hitmonlee in the first place, and it kind of becomes irrelevant. But Garchomp only requiring 2 energy, meaning you don't almost ever have to put energy on Gible unless you need to like get it out of the active spot and you don't have X speed, is awesome. But again, this is a stage 2 dual colored deck, so it does not work well all the time, but it is fun to try and use. And for some reason, the 100 from Dragon Claw plus the 50 from Cynthia, I love that breakpoint. A lot of Pokemon running 140 HP. Maybe even take out that Mars for a copy of Giovanni. Obviously, you can't Cynthia and Giovanni at the same turn, but you know, doing 110 damage is also big. So, but I love Garchomp. I do want to try this deck. I think I am going to attempt to use this deck in some of the 45 wins. I still have to get my 45 wins, and I'm going to try to do that with a few different decks, just because I want to try. But Garchomp's been my favorite. This was by far the coolest deck list that I saw, and I wish that it had made top cut. I think it got 67th place, and it just missed top cut. But anyway, cool deck. And let's go to the outro. That is all I have for our meta report. I know I haven't been uploading a lot recently. I've been picking up some extra work to make my office better so that I enjoy recording. Basically, the office that we have has just been really cold through the winter. And so I've got like a new heater in here to make it really nice. I got a, the GT racing chair that everybody has, but I basically was sitting in a chair that had like no armrest, and it didn't like support my whole back, so I could only sit in it for like so long before it started to hurt. So we've just made some upgrades. I'm still looking for a PC so that we can stream, but I'm hoping that this should make it easier to upload probably daily videos. I don't know, we're gonna see. I'm gonna try my best to do daily videos, but I want my videos to be like, I was getting burnt out just trying to come up with like a new random deck list every day that I wasn't enjoying playing with. So I'm gonna come up with something that I enjoy, where I can play with the cards I enjoy. I'm trying to do tournaments. The only problem is during the week. The weekend is super easy. I can compete in like 2 or 3 tournaments on the weekend. The weekdays are weird because for whatever reason, a lot of the tournaments on Limitless are during the day. There's a few at like 6 or 7 p.m. some nights, but they're very infrequent. And so it's very hard to be able to record those tournaments because I'm at work, so I can't. So maybe what I'll do is like split some of my channel into like tournament gameplay, because I do want to compete in tournaments. I find the tournaments just way more fun, being able to play it like chess, where I know what cards they have, but I don't know, what cards they have in their hand, and vice versa. I love that. I love being able to see their deck list, but not know which cards they have in their hand. Whereas playing online is like, okay, I'm going up against a Mewtwo deck, right? And you're playing like it's just a normal Mewtwo deck, and then all of a sudden they throw down like a random card that a Mewtwo deck doesn't have, and you're like, what? So I prefer tournaments, but I do also, now that we are getting more and more sets, and the next set dropping at the end of this month, at the end of February for Pokemon Day, so we have those 2 sets really, really close together, basically just 4 weeks apart. It's not just the one set anymore, so being able to build new sets is way more fun now. So I think I'm going to split some of the content on my channel between tournaments and like online gameplay, getting our win streak emblems, getting our 40 win emblem and stuff like that. But I just wanted to give you guys an update. I'm feeling pretty good again. I also spent about like 2 weeks sick when the new year started, so that was super fun. Being a substitute teacher, just immediately getting sick was amazing. Love that. So, but we're back. We are going to try to record frequently, but I'm also going to try to about once a week. I'm not sure what day yet. I feel like everybody does it on Monday because it's after the weekend and whatnot, but I like to do my own sort of meta research, just because I know what the meta is. I think we all know what the meta is, but I like to show you guys interesting decks that did well, right? That aren't necessarily meta. Maybe they're inconsistent, but maybe we could try some of those out on the YouTube channel, see if they're good. So but let me know what you guys want to see. I'm very interested. This new set has sort of revived me in wanting to make Pokemon Pocket content. There's way more content now. This was all I needed. I just think that first set should have been maybe a few more cards, but we're past that now. I'm very excited about this game, so I'll be making some content. Let me know what you guys want to see, and let me know what decks you guys are running to get your 40 wins, and I will catch y'all in the next episode. Peace.